There are moments in life when love is expressed not with grand gestures or passionate words, but with quiet acts of selflessness, a love so profound it transcends hardship, pain, even physical imperfection. This is one such story. He was young, full of ambition, with the world laid out before him. She was radiant, her beauty spoken of not just in whispers, but in open admiration. It was the kind of beauty that could stop time. When they met, it was as though the world suddenly felt smaller, narrowed down to just the two of them. He couldn't take his eyes off her. Her charm was magnetic, her presence undeniable. She wasn't just someone you glanced at, she was someone you remembered. And from that first moment, he knew he wanted to spend not just fleeting moments, but a lifetime with her. With confidence, but also trembling with the weight of his hopes, he proposed to her. And when she agreed to marry him, committing herself to him as he did to her, it felt like their future together had been etched in the brightest stars. The early days of their marriage were nothing short of idyllic. Their home buzzed with laughter, warmth, and mutual admiration. They dreamt of a shared future, planned for it piece by piece. When their eldest child was born and later a second, their family felt complete, a haven of love and joy. But life, no matter how golden, is rarely free from challenges. The husband worked for a company whose demands didn't always align with the tranquil life he wished to provide for his family. His job required him to travel, sometimes for months on end. It was never easy for either of them, but they bore it as a necessary part of their lives. Then came the day he had to journey again, this time to a foreign country. As they stood by the door, she held his hand tightly, her face betraying the unease she tried to keep hidden. Her eyes brimmed with silent fear. "What if something happens to you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled softly, brushing away a strand of hair from her forehead. "Nothing will happen," he reassured her. "I'll call you as often as I can. You won't even feel my absence." She nodded, though her heart remained heavy. It was the kind of heaviness only love brings, the weight of caring so deeply for someone else. And so, with a lingering embrace and promises exchanged, he left. The weeks turned into months. During his absence, tragedy struck. She fell gravely ill. Overnight, it seemed, her world irrevocably changed. The illness left her face disfigured, her once stunning features marred. She hardly recognized herself in the mirror. Her despair was overwhelming. She found herself lost in a swirl of dark thoughts, convinced her husband would no longer look at her with the same love. How could he? She wondered. She imagined him recoiling, unable to hide his shock, his disappointment. Her fear of rejection gnawed at her, growing louder with each passing day. She decided then and there, he must never know how much she had changed. If he could hold on to his memory of her as she once was, maybe that would be enough. Either way, there was no escaping the torment in her heart. Months later, the day arrived. He returned. As the sound of his knock echoed through the house, she stood frozen on the other side of the door. Her hands trembled, resting on the doorknob. She felt acutely aware of her appearance and what awaited her. His face when he saw her. With a deep, steadying breath, she opened the door. What followed left her completely unprepared. The moment his eyes fell on her, tears streamed down his face. Not tears of shock or dismay, but tears of anguish. He cried as though his world had shattered. Confused and heartbroken, she asked, "Why are you crying?" His voice quivered as he responded. "An accident happened while I was away," he admitted. "I've lost my sight. I can't see you, my love." It was like a blow to the heart. Her shock gave way to devastation. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She had been so consumed by her fear of his rejection that she hadn't imagined this, a tragedy so great that her appearance, her beauty, none of it mattered anymore. That day felt like the closing of a chapter, not just in her life, but in theirs. They grieved their individual losses together, hers for her beauty, his for his sight. And in that grief, they found strength in each other. Life settled into a new kind of normal. They adjusted to their circumstances with remarkable resilience. He adapted to his blindness. She supported him with unwavering devotion. Their children grew up surrounded by love, never questioning the sacrifices their parents made for one another. But fate wasn't done with them yet. One morning, she began feeling unwell. Her condition quickly grew worse, and by nightfall, it was clear she needed urgent medical attention. As he helped her into the car, guiding her trembling frame, his heart pounded with fear. On the way to the hospital, the unthinkable happened. Her breathing faltered and her hand slipped from his grip. A piercing silence filled the air. By the time they arrived, it was too late. She had succumbed to a sudden heart attack. The hours that followed passed in a blur. The man who had once stood at life's peak was now a broken shell of his former self. He wept bitterly during her funeral, each tear a testament to the depth of his love and the ache of his loss. As the mourners began to leave, one of the attendees approached him kindly, reaching out to offer assistance. "I can guide you home," the person said softly, looking at the man's tear-streaked face and assuming his blindness. But the man shook his head, his lips pressing into a thin smile as more tears escaped. "There is no need," he said quietly. "I'm not blind." The man helping him froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. A wave of confusion washed over his face. "But I thought—" The widower cut him off, his voice steady but heavy with sorrow. "I pretended to be blind," he confessed, his words measured and deliberate. "I pretended because I couldn't bear to see her lose her joy, her confidence. I wanted to spare her the pain of thinking she was less than what she once was. To me, she was always beautiful, and she always will be." The air seemed to grow still, the weight of his words sinking in. He turned and walked away, the silhouette of a man who had given the full measure of his heart, holding on to the memory of a love that was unbreakable, unseen, but never unfelt. And so their story became a quiet testament to love in its purest form, not bound by sight, looks, or even life itself, but by the enduring courage to put the other's joy above your own.